My name is Bill Dean. I'm the Regional Administrator for the U.S. NRC's Region 1 office out of King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. I have responsibility for the oversight of all the reactors in the northeast part of the United States, including Pilgrim. I appreciate all of you coming out here tonight to participate in our meeting. I want to explain a little bit about the format of the meeting so that you understand what we're going to do here tonight, because it'll be a little bit different than what we've done in the past. The first part of the meeting is actually going to be a two-part meeting. And the first part of the meeting will actually be a meeting between the NRC and Pilgrim licensee to talk about Pilgrim's performance in calendar year 2013. Because of Pilgrim's performance resulting in them having a number of unplanned scrams and unplanned scrams with complications, they have entered, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, a degraded cornerstone of our action matrix, which requires that we have a meeting with the licensee to talk about their performance, what was the reasons for the decline in the performance, and what their plans are for recovering from that performance and getting back into a better operating state. So that'll be the first part of the meeting, and we'll try and conduct that within a half an hour or so, because our desire is to really have the interaction with you. So the second part of the meeting, after we take a short break to kind of rearrange the room, will be an opportunity to have a question and answer session with the public here, and we'll move into a facilitated session, and Mr. Rich Barkley, who's wandering around the room somewhere, will be facilitating for that part of the meeting. So I wanted to make sure that you understood what our plans were for tonight. The meeting time is scheduled from 6:30 to 8:30. We do have a little bit of flexibility on the back end, that if we have a number of people that desire to have some questions and interactions with the NRC, and we get to 8:30 and we still have some more people that have not yet had a chance to do so, we have the flexibility to extend the time for some period, but there will be an ultimate cutoff point at some time because of the hotel and the security detail that's here, that we have to cut off questions there. Before we actually get into the meeting, I would like to give the opportunity for any congressional representatives or their staffers or local or state officials to stand up and be recognized. When we get in the Q&A session, if you desire to make a statement, we'll give you the opportunity to do that then, but just to stand up and be recognized. So any congressional members or members of their staff that want to be recognized.
Yeah, Mike Jackman, here on behalf of Congressman Bill Keating.
Okay, Mr. Jackman from Mr. Keating's office. Christina Pacheco from Senator Markey's office. Welcome.
And I'm Stephanie Houghton from Senator Warren's office.
Okay, Stephanie, I think everybody heard that one. Thank you for projecting. Okay, how about state officials? Any state officials here? Yes, ma'am. Okay, Monica from State Senator Murray's office. Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Seth Wolfine. I'm from Dan Wolf's office.
Okay, Seth is from Dan Wolf's office. Thank you, Seth. And then any local official? Oh, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Richard Rothstein, I chair the Plymouth Nuclear Matters Advisory Committee.
Okay, Mr. Rothstein from the Plymouth Nuclear Matters Committee, and I wanted to share with you all the Plymouth Select Board representatives were unable to attend tonight. They had a number of different conflicts. I think one of them actually is in a debate tonight, and we actually had the chance to meet with them earlier today to be able to share with them the things that we are going to discuss tonight, as well as to give them an opportunity that the things that are on their mind and on the minds of the members of their constituency. So we had a very good discussion with them today, and we've committed to give them feedback tomorrow on how the meeting went and what issues were raised by people here. So they were very interested. Unfortunately, just too many conflicts tonight. And then any other local officials?
Mary Lanford, Duxbury Nuclear Advisory Committee, here also the executive committee.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Ted Thomas, advisor to the Cape Cod National Seashore.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think that's it for local officials. I think I've went through the meeting format. What I'd like to do actually is turn it over to Mr. Ray McKinley, who is the branch chief responsible for Pilgrim oversight, and let him kick off the meeting.
Yes, good evening. We'd like to go over the agenda just briefly and have some brief introductions. Again, I'm Ray McKinley. I'm the branch chief for NRC Region 1, responsible for the oversight of Pilgrim, Vermont Yankee, and Millstone. From here, we'll just go down the line.
Eric Benner. I'm the Acting Deputy Division Director of the Division of Reactor Projects in Region 1.
I'm Max Schneider. I'm the Senior Resident Inspector at the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant, where we have 2 resident inspectors assigned full-time.
And I'm Brian Skravik. I'm the Resident Inspector at Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant.
I'm Bruce Chenat. I'm the Engineering Director at Pilgrim Station.
Steve Veracchi. I'm the General Manager of the plant.
Good evening. I'm John Dent. I'm the Site Vice President.
Dave Noyes, Director of Regulatory and Performance Improvement at the site.
Okay, thank you. Just briefly tonight, we'd like
Can you check
to...
to make sure people can hear?
Yes, can everybody hear okay on the overhead?
People in the back can hear okay? All right, so you need to
Okay,
speak
thank
more
you.
directly into mics.
Okay, just for the agenda, we want to talk about the reactor oversight process briefly. We'll also present our inspection findings and performance indicator results for the calendar year 2013 for Entergy performance. We'll also give them an opportunity to share their insights with regards to any performance improvement initiatives on our behalf. We would also, from that point, we'll transition into closing remarks from this phase of the presentation. We'll take a brief break, probably about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll address any public questions that you may have. As part of that, if you don't get a chance to voice your questions here, we have a number of ways where you can reach us, either on our public website. There's also feedback forms in the back here. There's a method for you to use your cell phone to scan in a QR code to input that data from your cell phone if possible, or again, website type information. Okay, Joe, next slide, please. Yeah, so I'd just like to talk to you a little bit, very briefly, about our reactor oversight process. So we have 3 strategic performance areas that we look at: reactor safety, radiation safety, and safeguards security type information. Also, safety cornerstones that we look at under those key performance indicators. For instance, under reactor safety, we have initiating events that we look at. We look at mitigating systems and barrier integrity. As part of our process, we have baseline inspections that we do throughout the year. In addition, we monitor a number of key performance indicators such as SCRAMs, SCRAMs with complications, safety system performance indicators, and things of those nature. We roll all these up in terms of significance. We'll take a look at our performance indicators as well as inspection findings, assign significance to those particular items, and then roll them into our action matrix and determine our regulatory response from there. From here, I'd like to turn it over to Max a little bit to talk about what we found during 2013.
Thanks, Ray. Joe, I think we're 1 slide behind, if we could advance. Okay, thank you. So, at Pilgrim in 2013, we conducted approximately 7,000 hours of inspections and associated activities. We have 2 resident inspectors on site throughout the year. Our inspection approach looks at modifications, it looks at operability assessment. Is that me? Is it this one of these?
Face it down.
Face it down?
Feedback.
From speakers.
Okay, thank you. Maintenance activities, testing activities, etc. So our purpose is a routine inspection and assessment purpose on site, so we can give the regional staff an insight into the performance of the licensee. The regional staff, largely from the Division of Reactor Safety, also conducts team inspections at the site. Examples of team inspections include a review of permanent plant modifications that are made at Pilgrim throughout that point. Problem identification and resolution is a team inspection to look at their CAP, or what we refer to as a corrective action program, the conduct of root causes, the conduct of apparent causes, to ensure that they have an effective program for correcting degraded conditions. Independent spent fuel storage is also an area that's been reviewed by the Division of Nuclear Material Safety recently and will continue to be assessed as it is constructed. Additionally, there are other inspections such as security, emergency preparedness, as you know, that we come in and conduct inspections of your activities to ensure you operate safely. Okay, this slide addresses the Pilgrim assessment results. The assessment is construed of findings and performance indicators. At Pilgrim, the findings through the 2013 year were all green. Green indicates a measure of safety significance, where green is the very low safety significance and the lowest safety significance that we assess for a given degraded condition. However, we also have performance indicators, and we have performance indicators in the area of initiating events, mitigating systems, barrier criteria, health physics, etc. In the case of initiating systems, we look at unplanned scrams, what we call unplanned scrams with complications. Unplanned scrams with complications means that there was a characteristic to the scram that the licensee had to take further action due to the lack of availability of a normal system capability that would typically be available to them on a routine scram, such as if they had to use safety relief valves to reduce pressure because of an issue that resulted in a higher pressure, or if they had a loss of feed water. Those are defined as complicated scrams. We have a very low threshold for complicated unplanned scrams with complications, which is no more than 1 in a performance indicator period. In addition, we have what we define as unplanned scrams per 7,000 critical hours in this same initiating event cornerstone. And that is just an unplanned scram that was not expected due to some equipment failure, personnel error, etc. Another feeder into this performance indicator is unplanned downpowers greater than 20%. So for Pilgrim in 2013, you exceeded the white performance indicators, or you exceeded the performance indicator numbers that transitioned you from a green indicator in the initiating event cornerstone to a white indicator, okay? 2 whites in 1 cornerstone results in a degraded cornerstone assessment, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But what I want to emphasize is, these are not just numbers to the commission. These are indicators of the potential for an underlying issue with equipment reliability, human performance, corrective actions, assessment, etc. So that's why this resides as one of our performance indicator assessment tools that we use to engage you guys earlier on in the process than later on when performance degrades to a different level. Brian's going to talk a little bit about the particulars of those 2 indicators.
Thanks. At the end of the 3rd quarter in 2013, thank you, the unplanned scrams with complications performance indicator crossed the threshold from green to white due to 2 scrams during the year being determined to be complicated. The first one was on February 8th of last year when you scrammed from 80% power during Winter Storm Nemo due to a loss of off-site power and a main generator load reject. And the second one was on August 22nd when you lost all of your feed water due to an instrumentation malfunction, and operators inserted a manual scram in response to that. Due to those 2 complicated scrams, you did exceed the threshold of greater than 1 complicated scram, and you did enter the regulatory response column of the action matrix, and those results were communicated to you in the assessment follow-up letter, which was issued in November 6th of last year. Additionally, in October of 2013, on October 14th, Pilgrim experienced a loss of off-site power due to an off-site failure in the Carver substation, and that acted as a contributor to your scrams with complications performance indicator, and also combined with those 2 previously discussed scrams and the January 10th scram, which resulted from a recirculation pump trip, which was due to a human performance error during maintenance, caused you to cross the threshold for the unplanned scrams for 7,000 critical hours. In conjunction with your pre-existing white indicator in unplanned scrams with complications, this caused you to cross into the degraded cornerstone column of the action matrix, and we have communicated those results to you in the annual assessment letter, which was issued on March 4th of this year. Go ahead.
Thank you, Brian. So the ultimate result in our reactor oversight process action matrix is that you are, due to the two white contributors to this cornerstone, in a degraded cornerstone. And we'll talk a little bit now about what the follow-on activities are going to be relevant to that.
Okay, and just to give you a perception of where you are relative to the rest of the industry, you have 84 plants that are currently in licensee response, 10 in regulatory response, and 6 in degraded cornerstone. So Pilgrim is in that mix. You have one plant, I think it's one of the Brown Ferry units, in a multiple repetitive degraded cornerstone column, and Fort Calhoun is currently in the inspection manual chapter 0350, which is a special bin for enhanced oversight that they may still have acceptable performance. So that's where you lay out relative to the rest of the nation. With regards to the degraded cornerstone, the agency's response ultimately will be a 95-002 inspection, which is a very in-depth inspection protocol, very intrusive. We will independently assess your root cause analysis, the corrective actions that you're taking to prevent recurrence and to manage sustained improvements moving forward. That's about 200 inspection hours worth of activity. Typically occurs over 1 or 2 weeks with a team of about 5 people. Typically we'll incorporate inspectors from other regions and or headquarters to provide an additional independence to that inspection effort. So once you identify that you're ready for that inspection, we will plan on performing that. And in order to return to the licensee response column, all performance indicators will need to return to green, and the 95-002 inspection will need to be successfully performed. And then Bill from...
Yeah, so Mr. Dent, that summary that we just went through provides the basis for why Pilgrim has been placed in the degraded cornerstone column of the action matrix. What we're interested in now is having an opportunity to hear from you and your team relative to your assessment as to why you think performance degraded as it did last year, and then your plans for trying to recover from that performance decline and achieve sustainable performance results.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Dean. With your concurrence, what we thought might be the best use of our time is for us to provide an overview of our strategies and our actions that we've been taking and are in the process of taking to this point to address the performance gaps you mentioned. Not just the performance gaps you mentioned, but also our return to excellence, industry excellence, which is at the end of the day, this is really where we're targeting. So what we thought we'd do is there are 3 fundamental pillars that go into the recovery, the excellence plan. They're around leadership, exceptional equipment performance, and performance improvement. And what I thought we'd do once I hand it off to the senior leaders sitting around me here and we talk about them is perhaps open it up for any questions that you might have.
Okay, that's fine. And you may find that we may interject if there's something that draws our attention in your presentation.
You bet. So before I hand it off to my team, just to kind of set the table a little bit, we had an opportunity with the expertise that we have on site as well as our fleet expertise, and in leveraging industry expertise, we worked together to develop a very comprehensive excellence plan designed, as I mentioned previously, to not only address the gaps that you had mentioned, but also to drive our performance back to industry excellence, which is where we will be. So that comprehensive plan I talked about is basically structured around 3 fundamental pillars that I just mentioned, and it's excellence in leadership, excellence in equipment performance, and excellence in performance improvement. So the way we're fundamentally structured around that is the senior leaders of the station, the general manager of plant operations sitting immediately to my right, the engineering director on the end, and the performance improvement director each own the functional areas. What I'd like to do is go ahead and hand it off. They're going to talk a little bit about each one, the strategies, the actions, and the progress to date, and we'll go ahead and take any questions you might have. Okay, Steve?
Okay, in the area of leadership, I want to talk about three different areas. The first one being in risk awareness and risk mitigation. It's a very important area for us to understand everything that's going on in the site, both in how they're impacting the risk associated with industrial safety, nuclear safety, radiological safety, as well as the plant generation risk. So we're very focused and focused in those areas, as well as focused on improving in those areas. And one of the places that we're also reaching out to our grid operators. You know, we spoke about two of the scrams that were associated with off-site power supplies. We're taking our knowledge of risks and the knowledge that the industry has on how to manage risk, and we've reached out to NSTAR and NGrid and essentially the operators, the grid operators, and we've worked with them to get intrusive into the next substations and their risk awareness and risk mitigation to those substations. And they've been working with us fairly well. We've actually implemented protected area boundaries. We've put controls in place that they control their switch yards for us. They actually survey the grids for us when they're going to take a line out. They survey and they actually provide us input into our risk structure to ensure we're involved, and they're helping us understand the risks that are out there as far as the operation of the grid. Along with that, we're also expanding our knowledge across the site and the impacts of risk and the awareness of risk and the mitigation of risk. And we've evaluated. We continue to evaluate every new discovery, every new corrective action that comes into place. So we're looking for active risks that are associated with work ongoing and the things that are discovered day to day, as well as looking at passive risks that are associated with work that's waiting to be done, or things that are associated with review of the plan. So it's an overall subject of risk awareness and risk mitigation is a focus for our leadership team.
Mr. Veraki, for a second there. Mm-hmm. Relevant to the grid operator changes that you've remarked on, have you institutionalized these changes in any manner, such as changing process or procedure or communication?
Yes, we have. We've actually proceduralized the approach that we've taken with the grid operator in our own procedures, as well as we've got a checklist per se that we agree to what are the risk mitigation actions that need to be taken, and then the grid operators actually sign off, the VPs sign off on those actions being taken before one of our offsite lines come out of service for maintenance or those types of things. So it's very formal, it's proceduralized, and it's signed off by Mr. Dent and their VP of operations.
Thank you.
Okay.
To follow up on that, have you, given what you've learned, have you benchmarked your previous decision-making to say, how would our decision-making have been different having these additional information sources?
Yes, in all these cases, what we've put in place adds multiple barriers to problems with equipment. So anytime we add a barrier to mitigate a risk, you essentially reduce the chance of that happening. So in all these cases, when we're working with the grid operators, we're actually adding barriers, and they're agreeing to add those barriers that ensure that we have controls in place before we move to the next step. And that's in that case, that's an improvement. It really, for us to reach out and attempt to control those things was not something we were doing in the past. We were controlling our own switchyard, we were controlling our own equipment. In this case, we're reaching out to and trying, working with them to control the risk in their switchyards.
We also had an industry group come in and assess the way that we deal with our on-site power and the risk associated with that, and they gave us a report which we're acting on.
So you've had a number of equipment challenges in the area of balance of plant performance. Can you explain any corporate support you're getting, financial support to help improve some of those equipment reliability issues?
Sure. In the area of exceptional equipment performance, which I'm the sponsor for, we had a corporate equipment reliability assessment come in to help us develop best practices. So we worked with the corporate and some of the other stations in the fleet to come up with best practices for Plant Health Committee. And Plant Health is the committee where we talk about equipment reliability, and we prioritize work to make sure that the right work gets completed so that we ensure a good, reliable operation. So we've implemented those best practices, and we're seeing improvements in our Plant Health Committee meetings, helping us drive to essentially working the right equipment and making sure that equipment it gets repaired. Now the fleet also has come and done subsequent additional reviews to see how we're going and to check and adjust our progress. And they've had 2 other touch points, and they'll continue to come in. In fact, in another 2 weeks, May 18th, they have another assessment that they'll do a detailed assessment of our performance as far as our equipment reliability.
To answer your question from a 30,000-foot perspective, the comprehensive plan I talked about is built in combination with the fleet, with the corporate entity, and it's resource loaded and from both human resource capital as well as financial resources. So the plan and the resources are meshed together. So structurally, that's how that works.
And another focus area to answer your other part of is to ensure that we're working on the right things in the plant, the right equipment is being maintained, and to improve the reliability of the equipment is the work management system. And we have instituted a number of improvements, including management ownership for each element of each of our managers have taken ownership for each element of that process. And what that drives forward is to ensure that we're doing the right PMs, we're doing the right maintenance at the right time, and we're identifying things that are off normal, degraded, and we're timely repairing that equipment. We've made quite a few improvements in the reliability of Pilgrim over this past year. We have some. We're very proud of the minimal amount of impacts we have to the operators currently.
Do you have any insights into how you got to the performance level that you did last year, as far as the number of equipment reliability issues you've had? Any insights into how you got there?
Yeah, in the performance improvement area, the causal analysis, the independent causal analysis for all the contributing events, as well as a common cause analysis, identified the risk issues that Mr. Baraki talked about, as well as additional improvements that are being made to ensure that our problem investigation resolution, our CAP process, is rigorous and it's driving issues at the plant to conclusion in a timely manner. And also our use of industry operating experience is identifying issues that are coming from the industry before events can happen at Pilgrim.
Relevant to your discussion about Plant Health Committee and PMs and et cetera, a lot of that points to upfront decision making as to what choices you're going to make in repair or replacement of equipment, et cetera. Did you look at in your assessment decision making in the moment? That is, if you have a forced outage where you're looking at repairs of what caused you to come down, repairs of something that might have broken on the way down or broken on the way up, and opportunities for repairs that exist on what you would call a forced outage list. Did you look at that decision-making as well, and do you see any areas that you're thinking of looking at changes or improvements to that decision-making?
We did include that in the review. That's the subject of latent risk, or that Mr. Baraki talked about, the idea of not performing work and the risk that poses for the station's performance. So that is included in the causal analysis. There are specific corrective actions to address both identification and resolution.
And our focus in the risk mitigation and the work management process improvements, as well as the Plant Health Committee that Mr. Chenard mentioned, really focuses on getting the right fix. It's not a matter of just restoring the plant power, restoring the plant systems, or it's about solving the problem the right way the first time, and putting a lot of emphasis on doing, making the right investment of time, and we are improving in that area. We're definitely made some headway in that.
So are you envisioning using the Plant Health Committee as a, emergent response tool as well as a planning tool? Is that what I take out of that, or no?
Well, I would say that the Plant Health Committee is more of a strategic tool. It's more of a tool to understand the impacts that are, get into the details of what the engineers know about the equipment, and make sure that we're challenging them for optimum performance. And then based on that, there's issues that come out of it that we put into our work management system, and then manage those things to ensure that we correct them in a timely manner. From an emergent basis, I think we have daily meetings and daily challenges and we keep lists of things that need to be taken care of, and we are forcing or encouraging and driving the organization to ensure we have very timely solutions to those problems. And as I said, we've done a pretty good job of keeping the numbers down, and we're feeling.
Yeah, regarding timeliness, so one of the key insights that we've gained during our assessment process last year was you're identifying problems, but the timeliness of corrective actions, we see a cross-cutting theme in that particular area, and we're just, that seems to be one key insight that we gained, is that you're just not going after them and correcting this in a timely fashion.
And based upon those issues, we did another common cause analysis that looked in the aggregate, identified that we had opportunities to improve our senior leader engagement in the prioritization of those items, making sure that we're keeping them in front of the senior leadership team, establishing single point accountability with specific due dates and actions that we track as a leadership team.
Thank you.
That's it.
Let me ask you one other thing relevant to the emergent decision-making that comes up, for example, in a forced outage or whatever. Do you guys, or have you looked at the role of an independent individual to kind of keep a sense of what is going on in that moment of the decisions to ensure that a nuclear safety, philosophy is being maintained, and that focus, isn't getting too narrow by the principal folks involved?
Yes, we actually have that within our own organization, where we assign people to be like a nuclear advocate. So in other words, their role is to stand back and watch and provide that input. So that's something that we're putting in place recently. We're just stepping through that now to help us in that. But the other aspect, that's something that we're going to do internally. But this is where the fleet really helps us quite a bit. So the fleet has what we call is corporate functional area managers that come to the site, and many times, and they'll come during forced outages, during our decision processes, and they'll oversee what's going on with a very independent eye and a very critical eye and they provide input both verbally and written reports before they leave to tell us what they're seeing. And if they see some things that they feel that they need to inject right away and to challenge us in a decision, they do that right away. So I have a counterpart that works for the fleet across the sites, and with our current improvement strategy, he's at the Pilgrim site once a month from the fleet, and we have 10 units, but they're focused at our site once a month to add that extra level of independence.
In addition to that, we're leveraging our own oversight organization to provide that function day in, day out in our standing meetings and our interaction with our workers.
Okay, we kind of hijacked your presentation through our probing questions, so maybe if you can pick up where, we probably got into a lot of what you want to talk about, but maybe you can pick up where.
Perhaps we move on to exceptional equipment performance.
So in exceptional equipment performance, which is essentially equipment reliability, we had 4 focus areas within that one focus area. First one being causal analysis, right? Improving our ability to find out what the problem is and being able to resolve that. So actions we've put in place is establishing that all the causal analysis that are written by engineering, which we write most of them, go through what we call our EQRT, which is our quality review team for engineering, which has the engineering leadership reviews each and every one of them to ensure that we get to the right cause, that we have the appropriate corrective actions, and that we've done the appropriate extended condition review. We've also put a significant amount of effort in improving our troubleshooting capability. Troubleshooting is key in identifying what that cause is and really getting to the root of the problem. So we've worked very closely with our maintenance organization to improve our ability to go do that. And a lot of it has to do with defining what the individual roles are and making sure that we're working together to come to a common solution. And we've also initiated training in both of those areas so that we can improve the quality of both of those products. We've already talked a lot about the work management system and plant health, so I won't go into those details. We worked, another area was precision maintenance. And with precision maintenance, we want to make sure that when we're doing the maintenance, that we're fixing the items correctly the first time, and that we're giving maintenance every opportunity to get their work done efficiently. So we're removing all the roadblocks, and that they're giving us good quality products. And we've put a lot of effort in improving the quality of our work orders and the quality of our procedures. And by doing that, we're increasing the quality of our maintenance, and we're eliminating errors that they could make, and we're also, again, like I said, improving the quality of maintenance by making sure we have good, detailed instructions to perform the work that needs to be performed. And the last area is the problem identification area. So we want to be able to identify problems prior to them being issues, prior to the equipment breaking. So we've created what we call monitoring time for what our system engineers do, 2 hours every day that they're dedicated to do their monitoring and trending, so that we can identify equipment issues in the early stages before they actually degrade to the point where there's a failure, and we can get them prioritized and we can get them work. And that's been really the key focus in that area of problem identification, along with a lot of focus on the operator tours and make sure that the operations people understand how important it is for them to identify the degrading trends, so that we can get involved and again repair the equipment before it actually does fail. Any questions?
So, in my experiences as a regulator, one of the things that I think contributes to good performance at a plant is when you have an operations organization that is demanding of quality and the support they get from maintenance, from engineering, and so on. And that, for example, your shift managers provide that leadership on a daily shift-by-shift basis. I'd be interested in your perspectives in terms of how do you think your organization is doing in that regard?
We're putting a big focus on that leadership, that part of our leadership. We have reworked and re-tailored our start of the day meeting, where the shift manager, the operations shift manager, starts the day with the priorities for the operations from the operations team, and then ensures that he has all the coordination worked out between all the maintenance departments and the engineering input. We've improved that meeting such that his presence and his leadership comes out solid in that meeting. We've removed some of the peripheral structure and things like that, so he can be very focused on helping leading the site. We're also focused on a mentoring of our shift managers, where the senior leaders, each of us, actually take on a shift manager as we're mentoring them individually, and we're very focused on the leadership that they're adding to the organization. For instance, one of the the places that we're currently focusing on is that the shift managers work around the clock, obviously, and they're working multiple shifts. And we're very focused on the times that they're on at the site during the day and where they interact on day shift and trying to reinforce their leadership and how they can impact the site during that day shift. So, and that's all coming out of our mentor program.
Thank you. Bruce said it.
That's it.
Okay.
Just one other topic that we haven't talked about yet in the area of performance improvement. We do an extensive amount of training through our accredited and non-accredited training programs. So we've renewed our effort to use training as a strategic tool in order to improve performance. Some of the areas that have been effective for us is in supervisory engagement, supervisor oversight, training of the operating crews and their criticality of their own performance. So we're looking to continue to leverage training as a strategic tool to improve performance also.
So along those lines, with the example you've given, you've expanded. I mean, obviously, all your staff had adequate technical training, but you're training in more maybe critical thinking and leadership skills to ensure you have the right level of ownership.
That's correct. Engagement as a supervisor function of when to engage workers and how to engage workers to get the most out of that interaction.
And what effective coaching looks like to change behaviors and improve behaviors, those kinds of things are part of the ongoing plan. They reside over here in leadership, in the leadership pillar. But
So you kind of have briefly discussed, and we've asked a number of questions about the three pillars of your excellence plan. I guess I have sort of two overarching questions. How do you know that your performance improvement plan is having the desired effect?
Okay, we have a series of performance measures that we have in place that is a structured program that Entergy has across the fleet. It's a management review process that we have. There's a number of performance indicators and performance measures that are measured there, and we every quarter we get a review from the senior executives from Entergy to ensure that the progress is made quarter to quarter that we expect and they expect to have. What we have done to ensure that we can help communicate our improvement month to month, we've separated out 29 of those performance measures that we can have impact to on a day-to-day basis. So we've taken those 29 performance measures and brought it to the site, brought it to the workers, brought it to the operators, and show them performance improvement or our improvement is moving and being measured by those indicators, those performance measures. And it's actually done a very good. It's been a very good tool for us to get some cross-functional teamwork, and that the people recognize as some performance measures may be looking towards an engineering discipline or a maintenance discipline or an operations discipline, but you need the teamwork to ensure they all come together in one place. So it's really done a lot to as a communication tool and help us drive continuous continuous improvement.
Our plan has several built-in effectiveness reviews, and then over and above that, we're leveraging the fleet and the industry as appropriate to provide those checks on our plan's progress toward excellence.
Yeah, we have a number of, it's a balance between objective and subjective measures in terms of overall performance. It's got to be a balance. So we talked about the objective, and there's some subjectivity built into what Mr. Noyes just talked about as well.
Yeah, and when you're talking about performance measures, certainly you don't want to simply be focused on something that is a number based on an input. But do you, in addition to that, talk to your folks and get feedback on some periodicity and, check the pulse of the folks that are going to make the difference, other than the four sitting up here?
Yeah, so when we initially created this excellence plan, we started out at the worker level, and we had small group meetings to get the input from them. And then we worked up to the supervisor level, up to the management level, before we put our plan together. And we actually just recently, within the last couple of weeks, all three of us got back again and had meetings again with the same individuals we met before to check and adjust to see what's going well, what's not going well, and what do we need to do to continue this improvement. And then we've gathered all that data, and now the next step is to go revise our planning, start using some of that data, get them more involved to start building us to that next level.
Anything particularly that sticks out?
Anything that sticks out from the feedback?
You say, boy, we're going to go after that.
Well, most of the feedback comes around teamwork and how we can work as a team. There is a lot of feedback about how decisions are made, and that the employees want to make sure that they understand how we're making decisions and have knowledge on why we're making the decisions that we make. So we've got a lot of feedback from that. And then just the overall recognition of the individual accountability that's needed across the site. We as individuals throughout the site need to be accountable for our performance, and that's been recognized and seen during these surveys that we've had. We've actually conducted individual surveys across two-thirds of our workforce, and got feedback on a multiple of issues with the idea of what would they recommend that we continue, what would they recommend that we stop, what would they recommend to improve on or start new. And we got some very good feedback from those, and ranged across all areas of management and teamwork and feedback and communications and those types of things. So, and we're in the process right now of incorporating that feedback into our improvement strategies.
Okay. So my second overarching question is, so back in 2011, there was a notable reactivity management event that we did a special inspection on, ultimately issued a white finding, and created some motivation at the site to take a look at its operations. The report that I get back from Mr. Schneider here is that he believes that the operations organization has improved as a result of the lessons learned that you applied, but that's only been a year or so. So my question is, so now we're seeing more issues with equipment reliability. So now you have another excellence plan to get after these things. What is the sustainability of these? How are you going to make sure that the improvements and enhancement that you're seeking to make will be sustainable for an extended period of time and not lead to some cyclical performance?
Yeah, the way the strategy's laid out, the way that the plan's built, it's a here and now plan. It started out as a here and now plan, but the plan is built. I think I heard Mr. Schnard use the word check and adjust. The plan is designed and built to take us from what our performance level is now, based on the issues that you discussed, through and continuously through sustained industry excellence and sustained industry excellence. So that's the way the plan's built. That's the way the format's structured. So it'll be a constant analysis and readjustment of the plans as we move forward, both internally and externally, to ensure we're continuing to drive that continuous improvement. That's how the plan's built. That's how the strategy's built.
So to give you some examples of that, we've put things into procedures and processes so it captures the improvement that we put in place and captures that improvement. One example would be the way we observe and oversee the operations crews during maneuvering times or even during the simulator scenarios. And we actually have a very detailed procedure checklist that the management team uses to provide feedback to the operators, and we're we're watching everything from how they're monitoring the control boards, how they're using teamwork to respond to changes, in multiple different aspects of operational excellence. And then we're measuring them against some of these checklists, and then we communicate afterwards and say, okay, these are the types of things that we've seen, these are the types of things that we'd recommend for improvement or to continue to improve. And that is in a process, it's in a procedure. We pull it out anytime we go and maneuver the plant, we pull that out, and we have managers oversee the control room activities when that happens. So it's driving those improvements into processes that's going to keep it sustained.
Okay. John, do you have any closing?
Yeah, Mr. Schneider made a comment when he was going over the regulatory oversight process that these aren't just numbers to us, and I think particularly for the residents, and put words in your mouth, but I think you see how aggressively we're going after this improvement and have been from the beginning. We are seeing clear objective evidence that performance is improving and moving in the right direction. So for us, as we mentioned a couple times, the plan is to continue to check and adjust and make the tweaks necessary to continue to drive our performance. And we have one objective in mind, that's a safe and efficient operation of this power plant. And the best way we know how to do that is to drive our performance back to the level of industry excellence and sustain it at that level. So that's what our vision is, that's our target, and we won't quit until we achieve that.
Okay, well, none of us are from the state of Missouri, but I think we're in the mindset of show me, right? We're going to look for sustained, demonstrated performance. Obviously, the reason that we're engaging at this level, the way that we are, is to assure that any performance decline that's potentially occurring gets arrested before plant performance moves further over into columns of the action matrix that warrant even greater NRC intrusiveness. So our mutual desire is for you to show good performance and operate the plant safely.
Understood.
So in terms of I guess, a summary of our 2013 assessment, while Entergy did operate Pilgrim in a manner that preserved public health and safety, performance deficiencies were identified that led to the plant being in the degraded cornerstone of the action matrix. This year we'll be engaging with you with a 95002 supplemental inspection, which Mr. McKinley described, and we'll be waiting for your providing us the time that you're ready for us to come and inspect you with that intrusive inspection. Before I get to Ray for a couple of administrative things before we move on to the next portion of the meeting, I do want to recognize the individual to my left here, Max Schneider. Max has been the senior resident inspector at Pilgrim for the last 7 years, and consistent with agency policy, we do not allow our residents or senior resident inspectors to spend more than 7 years at any one site because to assure that there's no objectivity concerns that could arise from being on a site for too long a time. So Max has been an extremely dedicated public servant. He has had the desire to preserve public health and safety at the forefront of his actions and his activities, and I have take a lot of pride in having the opportunity to have worked with Max. Max is actually going to be going to a plant that, when you looked at the table that Mr. McKinley showed, okay, the one plant that's in Man Chapter 350 oversight, which is the most significant oversight level, Fort Calhoun in the Midwest, Max is going to be the senior resident of that plant. And Max, I wish you the best of luck in that. And he'll be leaving actually fairly soon. And we actually do have his replacement here. Where's Erin? Erin Carfang, if you stand up. She'll be the new senior resident. Erin is currently the resident inspector at Beaver Valley in western Pennsylvania. Has done a great job as a resident inspector and has really earned and deserves the opportunity to be promoted to senior resident. And I look forward to her and Max having a great transition, and Erin providing that same focus on public health and safety that Max has. So with that, Ray.
Thank you, Bill. Yes, just a couple of quick administrative reminders. There's a number of ways to contact the agency, and the handouts we did provide, and there's some in the front, I believe, still. You can contact Public Affairs and report a safety concern through our allegation hotline. There's also our public website that's available to you, and our public website also has a number of detailed information, links related to our reactor oversight process. public reading room, and document centers as well. So that's all I have on that. From here, we'd like to take a short break, probably about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And from there, we'll come back and entertain questions from the public.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the ground rules of how this presentation will go on, the way the question and answer session. And before I get started, I wanted to make you aware, if you're wondering, all the cameras and whatnot around here, there is a Plymouth area cable television station that's filming this. There's a documentary maker. There is one interest group taking pictures, and there were 3 radio stations here, so it's a very well covered meeting. As we start in here, what I'd like to do is call people to this microphone over here, and I'm actually having a microphone issue, so I'll swap microphones here in a minute. And what I'll do is I'll call 3 people at a time. The first one comes up, the other 2 are ready to come, and then I'll always have 3 people in the queue, so you're not sitting here waiting, wondering who's next. You'll have a little bit of time to prepare. I would ask, when you come to the microphone, if you have a statement to make and you're not asking a question, if you can say you're making a statement, that would be helpful. And if you could keep your statement concise, 3 to 4 minutes, that'd be greatly appreciated. If you have a question, please ask your question or questions to the NRC. What they'll do is reply back. If you have one follow-up question or something like that, then we'll continue with that. We have 23 people who want to speak tonight. So that's why I'm trying to keep people to 3 to 4 minutes. As your time comes up, I'll give you some nonverbal cues. I'll be sitting over here and I'll try to approach you a little bit. And then you'll hear my phone alarm go off as we get closer to time. So if people are respectful of the time and be concise with their remarks, there's a lot you can say in that period of time. We'll be able to get through, hopefully almost all of the speakers that want to speak this evening. If there's no other questions before we start the meeting, then what I'd like to do is call the first 3 people. First one I'd like to have come up is Dave Agnew with Cape Cod Downwinders. The second would be Anna Baker with Pilgrim Coalition. And the third would be Pine du Bois of the Jones River Watershed Association.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's painful.
So, my name is David Agnew, and I'm with Cape Downwinders, and I live in Harwich on the Cape. And that means that I live in an area that's in the ingestion pathway zone, not the inhalation pathway zone. And my understanding is that that means that radiation in the event of a severe accident could be deposited on the ground, but somehow it wouldn't come through the air, so we wouldn't breathe it, which I've never understood. But I think there's this thing where the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is, I guess its mandate is reasonable assurance of adequate protection. And that is like a pretty vague mandate. So what does it mean? Well, Joseph Hendry, who was atomic, while he was an NRC commissioner, said it means exactly what we say it means. So if we combine this meaningless mandate with engineering probabilistic risk assessment, we get statements like the risk of a core melt with breach of containment in a Mark I reactor is one chance in a million reactor years. That came out of the NRC. Now this may sound okay, but real-world experience is that 3 of the 33 Mark I reactors ever built suffered this exact fate, a core melt with breach of containment. And 3 years after that event, though that accident is still ongoing, leaking about 3,000 tons of radioactive water into the environment every day. Back in 1972, the same commissioner, this time he was with the Atomic Energy Commission, Joseph Hendry, he was aware that the Mark I containment probably couldn't contain a severe accident, but he decided that the most important thing was to make sure that the industry kept churning along, so they decided to continue licensing them. Too bad for the Japanese. So then in 1989, top NRC safety official Harold Denton said that you'll find something like a 90% probability of breach of containment in the event of a core melt accident at a Mark I reactor. So Fukushima really shouldn't have surprised anyone because, after all, 90% chance. And in its wisdom, the NRC recommended that operators install vents in Mark I containments. That was prior to Fukushima. Post-Fukushima, NRC staff recommended that the vents be filtered. But the commissioners ruled against that. So in light of a containment which cannot contain, this is what we have here in Plymouth, and a vented containment, go figure, vents without filters, I wonder how the NRC can even speak of barrier integrity. The integrity of Pilgrim's containment matches the integrity of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission itself. It's lacking. I'd like to say something about spent fuel that Plymouth never signed up for being a nuclear waste dump, but it's beginning to look like not only will the waste fuel stay here in Plymouth for hundreds of years, it could well be forever. The U.S. record on spent fuel storage, long-term spent fuel storage, is pretty horrible. We spent $100 billion of taxpayer money, ratepayer money, not Entergy's money, by the way. It's the ratepayers who contributed to the fund to build Yucca Mountain, and that's been scrapped. The other site we can look at is the Waste Isolation Pilot Project in New Mexico, which is a Department of Energy deep repository for nuclear waste. And it's been operating for 15 years. The EPA has ruled that such a waste storage site needs to safely store the waste for 1 million years. So after 15 years, after 70 years of the nuclear industry, we have no idea what to do with the waste. And after 15 years of deep storage repository, we have had a leak which has released plutonium and americium to the nearby communities. So that's all of my statement, but I do have a very quick question, and that is the replacement on-site inspector, does Aaron, I believe?
Right in front of you, Dave.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi. Well, I can ask you directly. Do you have any history with Entergy?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you.
And for those of you who didn't hear the answer to Dave's question, he asked Erin if she had any previous experience with Entergy, and she has not. Matter of fact, Erin comes to us, she was actually a naval officer in the United States Nuclear Navy, and as I mentioned earlier, has served for the last several years as the resident inspector at Beaver Valley in western Pennsylvania.
Go ahead, Anna.
Hi, my name is Anna Baker. I live in Marshfield, Massachusetts. I'm a founder of the Pilgrim Coalition, which is a group of 28 organizations and about 500 residents who are concerned about the growing risks of Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station on our communities. And those risks are very real, despite the industry's argument against that. But more and more people are becoming aware of the problems at Pilgrim, and I thank you, NRC, for having a meeting here. I know sometimes these meetings can get contentious, but we're trying to keep our cool so that we can engage with you and we can actually get real responses. So thank you. One of the real concerns I have after reading recently that after the Vermont Yankee shutdown, Entergy has filed a request for all off-site emergency planning in the zone, the off-site emergency planning zone, to be eliminated. And it's really a shame that the NRC is even considering the possibility of off-site emergency planning zone, because 16 months after a reactor is shut down, there's still plenty of fuel to go for thousands of years. And, Pilgrim could very well face that same possibility. We have, so much spent fuel. I think we could all agree in this room that the spent fuel problem is a real problem. And most of us could agree that there isn't going to be any federal repository anytime soon. So that being said, the nuclear waste site, as some people call it, has really become a nuclear waste dump, and it's in our backyard. And to think that there may not be an emergency planning zone because Pilgrim Entergy doesn't want to pay for it is absolutely absurd. And so my question for you tonight is, will you promise us that the emergency planning zone around Pilgrim will exist even after Entergy is decommissioned?
Okay, Anna, it's a good question. We actually have one of the members of our staff from headquarters who's an emergency preparedness expert in the agency, Trish Milligan. Trish, can you take that?
Yeah, thank you. The licensee, when they go to decommission a plant, applies for an exemption from certain requirements, and EP is one of the ones where they apply for an exemption through our exemption process. Until the exemption is granted, or if it's granted, if it's not granted, they still operate under the current licensing basis. When you look at a shutdown reactor and all the fuel is removed and put into the spent fuel pool and or stored in casks, the probability of a severe accident exceeding the EPA guidelines, protective action guidelines off-site, is very, very low. In fact, when we do our analyses, you see that you don't get doses above 1 rem, which is what the EPA says is requirements for an off-site emergency preparedness. Communities still have, as part of the National Incident Management System, as part of the federal government's National Response Framework, an emergency preparedness framework that exists throughout the entire United States and throughout communities, including here in Pilgrim, in the Plymouth area, that look at disasters and events other than nuclear power plant type of events. When we do our analysis, there is an adequate amount of time. There's 10 hours at a minimum, more, because we make some very conservative bounding assumptions, from when you'd actually get to the point where you would start to lose all your water and lose your cooling in your spent fuel pool, to when you heat up enough to have a problem off-site. Within that 10 hours, there's the ability to mobilize effectively and move the population most at risk from the area if that's what you needed to do. And we do that routinely in this country in terms of ad hoc evacuations go on all the time in this country. So we have great confidence in the ability of your first responders to be able to mobilize and, in fact, take whatever protective actions are necessary.
So what I'm hearing pretty clearly is that the same thing will happen at Pilgrim that's happened at Vermont Yankee, which is that the emergency planning zone will likely not be the responsibility of Entergy, and Entergy will likely not have to pay for anything anymore.
I don't know what Entergy's plans are for the Pilgrim site, so I can't.
Well, it sounds quite clear that you're confident that the emergency planning zone is not necessary.
I explained our process. Whether or not Entergy chooses to apply for that exemption is up to them, and so you'd have to talk to them about what their plans are, but I can't speak to that.
Okay, well, I would ask that the NRC take a hard look and not trust that Entergy's proposals and studies are necessarily correct. I mean, the Japanese people had all too much faith in the company itself, in the company of TEPCO, and look what happened there. So that's one of the problems. But the other problem I think we're dealing with here is that Entergy holds a little too much power with the NRC, and we're asking you to give the public an equal amount, if not more power, because we're the ones who are going to be affected. Entergy is based in Louisiana, and we're here. Thank you.
After tying us up, Mary Lampert will speak, and then Heather Lightner.
Hi, good evening. Pine Dubois. I'm the Executive Director of Jones River Watershed Association and Cape Cod Baywatch. I'm here tonight, really unfortunately, because we need, I think, to get across to you the need for the NRC to really take a broader view of the public safety and the environment. Our concerns dating back to 2006 during the relicensing procedure was about the cooling water intake system. And the cooling water intake system entrains and impinges a great number of aquatic species in Cape Cod Bay and also warms up the bay. And we were assured at that time that Pilgrim would not be relicensed for another 20 years until EPA reissued its permit, which it has still not done. And so there's an expired EPA permit. And even more than that, that is not, the conditions of which are not being followed by Entergy. This creates a dilemma of confidence, if you will, that things that were set up to ensure protection of the environment are not being followed because it's inconvenient. And that is followed through in various ways when you get into such dynamic planning processes as we heard tonight, or say the Fukushima fixes that we were speaking about earlier. In that case, you're talking about a flex system that is going to yet again put another pipe into Cape Cod Bay and in order to induce more water into the spent fuel pool. But there's no permit or license for that. There's been no review of that. Just like there's no real concerted, concentrated, consultant, professional look at the increasing storms and the increasing sea level rise. We see that along the embankment, from Google Earth, you can see it too, along the embankment along Pilgrim, that over the last several years there's been more and more little Jersey barriers being put up. Is that supposed to be a seawall? If they're taking measures to put up little Jersey barriers, do you think there's something going on, or do you think they're trying to keep a boat out of there? From the view that we have, and from what we see, and from what we experience, we know the sea level is rising around that plant. And we also know that they are now constructing the spent fuel storage pad to be very close to the coastline, not very far above the existing sea level based on a plan that was developed in the 60s. Well, a lot has changed since then, including all of the datum that we use to base our assumptions on. So we need to know that the NRC is going to require of Entergy before a dry cask goes on to the new pad a real flooding analysis that takes into account the science of sea level rise. The science of global warming that says we're getting increasing storms, they're going to be more difficult to contend with, the waves are going to get higher on top of higher seas, and you have radioactive waste sitting right next to the shoreline, and as I said earlier, we do not want it buried in the bay, let alone released into the atmosphere. The concern is that there's a blanket over the agencies where the EPA is supposed to be doing this, but they haven't done it yet, so there's been administrative continuances. And the NRC says, well, I can't step on that turf because the EPA is trying to take care of that, but they're not. So what do we do? You know, can you require Entergy to address, as the President has required you to do as an agency of the federal government, sea level rise prior to any new change at Entergy, including the location of dry cask storage, and to evaluate their operations based on current information and current data? Thank you.
Rich, if I can address one or two things there that Ms. Dubois raised. First of all, with respect to the issue of sea level rise, I think one of the more significant outcomes from our lessons learned from evaluating the events that occurred at Fukushima, where you had the significant natural event with the earthquake and then the tsunami that followed it, is that we need to periodically go back and look at plant design relative to what the most current environmental conditions are. So, for example, you're seeing with respect to requiring licensees to do a seismic reanalysis, which has been in the press recently here. They're required to do a flooding hazard reanalysis, which is due next March. And the NRC, in its Fukushima Lessons Learned actions, identified a future issue to think about once we get through the current seismic and flooding hazard reevaluations is, should we, as a matter of course, periodically ask licensees to do reevaluations due to environmental conditions, which would include things like sea level rise, as opposed to waiting for some event to occur somewhere and say, gosh, I guess we should have thought about that. So that's going to be something that I think in the future you will see the NRC embed in its processes.
But that's precisely my point. The dry caster to be moved in September, it's not due until March. I'm asking you to get it done before March. At Pilgrim.
Okay, understand. Well, you remember, okay, so the plant's designed to a certain level, right? I think 23 feet above mean sea level is the design of the plant. The FCC pad is another foot or two above that, right? You look at any of the events that have occurred historically relative to Cape Cod Bay and the coastline that Pilgrim is on, there's been no events that have even come within half of that height in terms of sea level rise, right? So
No, not right. I don't think that's right.
Right.
And I would like you to demonstrate. I apologize. I don't think that's right, and we have asked for the evidence to back that up by, getting Entergy to give us pictures during storms. We have pictures during storms of every place around except there, and that's where it matters to us. You're the ones that can acquire those for us, and as I was saying earlier, we don't want it in the stilling basin. We want it at the surface so we can actually see what's happening. We're concerned about, the force of the water.
So I will say, at least for recent current events, Mr. Schneider has been on site during some of these natural events and has,
Mary Lampert, Pilgrim Watch, resident of Duxbury. The performance indicators that are in the green there to assess whether we have reasonable assurance for reactor safety, radiological safety, and safeguards. There are too few of them, and they do not address the key issues. If in fact they did address the key issues, instead of being green, there would be many, many reds there. And here's why. Look at reactor safety. The performance indicators are unplanned scrams, unplanned power changes, unplanned scrams with complications. What we know to be the greatest threat is the spent fuel pool. It is overcrowded, and as significantly, it is closed frame. There is nothing there concerning the spent fuel pool, concerning the fact of a fire that our Attorney General has looked at, and you could also look at the NRC's earthquake study at Peach Bottom. That's only one example that's missing, and a true assessment of security acts of malice, looking at the no protection from attack from the air, and a small airplane certainly could go through the roof of the spent fuel pool, as Senator Wolf, my aide, will probably discuss. Also, from the water, it's minimal. You can get back to mitigating systems. That's the next one. Performance indicators of the HIPC and various heat removal systems. Okay. And what's missing? Mitigation for the real threat of a spent fuel pool fire is obviously expedited transfer of the assemblies from the pool to dry cast, instead of the games that are being played by the NRC in their draft waste confidence. Also, a true seismic analysis done not in 2 years to do the analyses, allowing and having Entergy and the NRC come up with a risk number of a seismic event and then put that into their formulas when in fact nobody really knows what the risk is. And so what we will find is any fixes will be determined by economics, not by the analyses. The lessons learned from Fukushima, too little, too late. As far as mitigation goes, no mentioning. Spent fuel pool, for example, water level, but not water temperature. That's not due till December 31st, 2016. Reliable hardened vent, not due for completion June 20th, 2018. Dry well vent, June 20th, 2019. Seismic study, 2016. So in other words, the lessons learned, the mitigation is not until quite in the future. So give it a read. Barrier integrity, David Agnew spoke to that from Cape Downwinders, that we know that the containment is not able to withstand a pressure buildup. If anyone doubted that, Unit 1, 2, and 3 in Fukushima showed it. Then we can move on, and we can go on and on. Emergency planning is one of the last cornerstone under reactor safety. It got a green. This is ridiculous. Communication systems. As I've emailed to Bill, the Everbridge system to notify workers. The union has refused to give any number or email out other than the home number, telephone number, unless Entergy will come up with some money. And so, will the workers be notified? Yes, if they happen to be home and no one's on the phone. We have satellite phones to notify the various EOCs. They do not work, rather, inside unless there's a base station and an antenna. Now, that's a $200 item. It's not in a lot of the EOCs. So that means, what, our emergency management director has to leave the EOC and stand outside in order to communicate? That's ridiculous. The sirens. That was looked at, however, the sirens are only outdoor notification systems for the public. It doesn't matter whether the siren sounded. The real issue is, was it heard? Duxbury had a telephone survey on our reverse telephone system right after the November 21st siren test. 40.3% of the respondents didn't hear the sirens. 72.7% didn't hear or understand the siren's verbal message. So quite obviously, a siren doesn't get a green, it gets a red. Also, the ETEs, anyone is smoking something if they believe that in 6 hours you can evacuate the whole EPZ. No one believes this. Reception centers are only equipped, I'm almost finished, 20% of the population. Now, you may not live here, but I know hotels in Boston, hotels 25 miles distant and plus, do not have radiation detectors. They are not capable of determining who's contaminated or to clean them. So, the whole thing's absurd, plus the Met Towers were down twice. Then we move last. Radiation safety will be discussed by Rebecca Chin from the Duxbury Nuclear Advisory Committee. That gets a red also. Security, as I said, a red. There is no protection from an air attack, protection on site. There is minimal from the water. And land is a little better, but the fact that 2 women could go into the parking lot, go into the building to ask for a tour tells me there is something seriously wrong, and the duck hunters shooting guns were where they shouldn't be. I'm glad they were apprehended in shooting ducks, but not shooting at the reactor. So therefore, I give it a red, and I also would put the blame on NRC, as demonstrated by Ms. Milligan, who told two untruths. Number one, a cask can be penetrated by weapons that are available today. Each cask contains half the cesium-137 as released in Chernobyl, and a spent fuel pool fire can begin and release in 4 hours or less. So that should be a major lesson to take out of here on who to believe and who is responsible. Thank you.
So, Mary, a whole slew of issues there, and I'd like to have the time. Maybe we can talk one-on-one about some of these. But I do want to address a couple. I might ask one of my senior reactor analysts here, Wayne Schmidt, to talk a little bit about seismic analysis and what the licensee will potentially be required to do. But I did want to address the issue of protection of attack from the air. This was something that obviously after the events of 9/11 was studied quite considerably by the NRC and other federal agencies that have responsibility for air safety and air protection. And as you may recall, around every nuclear power plant in this country, there was a no-fly zone that was established, much like over the Washington, D.C. area and other places of national import. But over time, as the Federal Aviation Agency and the Department of Homeland Security and other organizations were able to effect appropriate things to make our airways safe, hardened cockpit doors, air marshals on planes, and so on, it was determined that was the appropriate and most effective way to deal with aviation safety, not to try and protect every single piece of critical infrastructure in this nation from air attack. So that may not be satisfactory to you, but that was what occurred in that regard. And then the other topic that I did want to address, maybe Wayne, you can spend a minute talking about seismic risk. And as it pertains to Pilgrim and what the next steps were.
Thanks, Bill. As Bill said, my name is Wayne Schmidt, and I'm one of the senior reactor analysts in the region. And my responsibilities are I'm one of those number guys. Like when you're talking 10 to the minus 6, 10 to the minus 5, 1 in a million, I generate those numbers, okay? So, and then they're not, even to me, they're not particularly satisfying, okay? But they're a way for us to measure what happens at plants relative to other plants. So that's why we have them. They obviously, people win the lotto all the time, right? So probabilities aren't the whole thing, and that's not what we focus on all the time. From a seismic standpoint, the commission, even before the events at Fukushima, we had an understanding that we didn't have a lot of new information on seismic events and actually collecting all that information and coming up with an overall understanding of the potential for seismic events at these stations. And that's based on the developing of new techniques and new state-of-the-art methods to do that type of analysis. Within the last couple years, we have we do what we call an expert elicitation process, where experts throughout the country come together, and I'll tell you, seismic analysis is not easy. It's not easy at all. Okay, I've spent a couple years now looking at it, and I'm just cracking the surface of trying to understand it. It's for the ologists, and I'm not an ologist. Okay, but we have people that are, and they are experts on seismic, and we have a good set of data now that we can project what we believe the best chance of a seismic event at any station in the country, or any actually the USGS now is that you could predict the chance of a seismic event at any point in the United States. You go to their website, call it up, and say, okay, what's the chance of a seismic event happening of whatever magnitude you pick at any given period of time, and that data is available now. That data we're taking is being fed into a study to try and understand what it means relative to the safety of the plants. And again, it's a very complex study. It's based on the frequency of the ground moving and what when the ground is moving, what that frequency will do to components at the plant, including the structures, pumps, systems. Everything has a natural frequency. So if you vibrate it at the natural frequency, you're going to get a response from it. So that's the type area we're trying to understand, trying to get our arms around it, trying to figure out what does it mean relative to the safety of the plant. We do believe right now that given the information we have, that the plants are safe and they're operating within our current NRC guidance for operation of plants. The licensee right now, they submitted data on March 31st that the NRC staff is presently reviewing, and we hope to get a letter out within a couple weeks. And all the plants in the country submitted this data. We hope to get a letter out within a couple weeks that prioritizes the response that we're asking licensees to give us to conduct that analysis of how they believe the systems will respond to this new seismic data. And I really don't want to say it's an increase in seismic data. It really isn't. We have a better understanding of what the seismic data is. There's really been no increase. It appears to be an increase because the numbers have increased, but it's really just a better understanding. And with this better understanding, if the licensee needs to make changes to the plant to ensure that the systems can respond, we will require them to make those changes to keep the plant safe. Also in that regard, and people mentioned the flex equipment. The flex equipment, we're going to ask the licensees if that equipment is being utilized, it's going to have to meet some of these seismic standards to ensure that equipment isn't damaged in the event of a seismic event, that the licensee and the people at the site can get to that equipment and then use it to get water to the reactor to keep the reactor cool. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Good job.
Heather, you next. She's here. She's not. Karen Vale. And after Karen, we'll need Ted Thomas.
What was the last name for Heather? Did she give a last name?
Heather Later.
Heather Leitner. She's not here. Certain citizens of Plymouth, she's not here? Okay. You're up, Karen.
Can you talk a little louder? Can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm having a microphone. We'll work around it.
You can use this.
Hello, Karen Vale, Cape Cod Baywatch. I have questions tonight about climate change, specifically related to warming water temperatures. We know that Pilgrim had to power down several times last summer during a heat wave because the water in Cape Cod Bay became too hot for them to use for cooling water. And we do know also that the Connecticut Millstone plant recently just got approval from the NRC to do a license amendment where they're able to use hotter water now for cooling. So my first question is, what do you think the likelihood of a similar license amendment happening at Pilgrim could be in the near future?
So I actually asked the licensee that question today because I had the very same question. And as they were dealing with that particular issue last year, they found that there was a connection between the inflow and the outflow. Right, there was some synchronization that if they operated at higher power levels, it created this higher inlet temperature. And so what they found last year is that they reduced power somewhat, then it sort of disconnected that. So at this point in time, there is no license amendment request that's on the books for them. They have not requested it like Millstone did. If they choose to do that, they would have to provide a fairly substantive analysis like Millstone did to get the NRC to review and if demonstrated to be safe, approve it. But at this point in time, Pilgrim has not requested that. I think their plans are, if that issue recurs this year, they will deal with it by adjusting power level to plant.
I see, okay. And then I guess the follow-up question would be, could you talk a little bit about the process that you went through, went through at the Millstone plant? And I guess one of the things I was hoping you could specifically address is what you just mentioned, is how do you decide whether or not the equipment is capable of operating properly and safely with higher water temperatures? And actually I have a couple other things I was hoping you could specifically address. Does hotter water coming in through the intake structure also mean that hotter water is discharged into the water body? And then were any other options considered by the NRC, any other technologies or upgrades that, would have mitigated the problem, but also maybe perhaps would have better protected the marine environment that plant was located on?
Okay, so let me take the first one on. I may seek some support from Mr. Snyder or Mr. Benner here. In terms of the process, so when a licensee submits a license amendment, so let's take this particular case where they wanted to raise the temperature limit that they would have for inlet temperature. They would do whatever the appropriate technical analysis. In this case, the really big concern for the NRC is, will they be able to cool their safety systems if needed for an accident, right? The higher the temperature, they may not be able to cool various reactor components or the reactor containment if there were to be an accident, because they need to be able to reject the heat somehow, right? So every plant in this country, when they were built, 10, 20, 30, 40 plus years ago, the design that goes into the plants and the systems is very conservative. Engineering designers provide a lot of very conservative assumptions in terms of the operations. And so what you see in situations like this is that engineers will look at, well, what are all the assumptions that we made, right? And what are all the analyses that we utilized to come up with this number? And they'll go back and look at, well, this assumption probably was too conservative by a certain factor. Given the fact that we've had this many years of operating history, we know better. This is perhaps a more realistic value. So in sort of simplistic terms, that's part of what they go through in terms of the analysis, and then we will independently look at those calculations or that analysis. I don't know if, Eric, you've had experience in licensing, right?
Yeah, I was going to talk more to the impacts you talk about. Usually for discharge temperature, I think for most sites that have once through cooling, they have limits in their discharge permits. So, that would be the ultimate restraining limit. If they want to discharge at an increased temperature, they would have to seek approval from whatever authority, whether it's the state or the EPA. Also, for things like this, I can't speak specifically to the ultimate heat sink, but when plants have done what we call extended power up rates, where they increase the amount of power they're putting out, that results in oftentimes increased temperatures, and we end up doing an environmental assessment of that, and that environmental assessment we engage the state on to understand the relationship of that with their permitting process. So, I mean, ultimately, I go back to the limits on the discharge temperature are driven by the state, but we do look at the environmental impacts when they do a licensing action that specifically increases the temperature.
So if that intake water temperature did increase and that did cause the discharge to be hotter, then their NIPD's permit would have to be updated as well?
Correct.
If that did cause that, okay.
If it exceeded the existing limit in the permit.
Exactly.
Now,
they couldn't exceed the limit, right?
Right, they couldn't, right.
Okay.
We have to move on.
Okay, sorry, I could be here all day. Okay, thanks.
Ted Thomas, please. After him, Rebecca Chin, please.
Good evening, and thank you for having us tonight. My name is Ted Thomas, and I would like to speak to you wearing a couple of hats tonight. The first hat is as a commissioner to the Cape Cod Advisory Commission, and that's the Cape Cod National Seashore, and secondly, as a citizen of Wellfleet, Massachusetts. So my commissioner's hat. Prior to the relicensing of Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant, the commissioners voted unanimously in opposition to the relicensing, and the superintendent of the Cape Cod National Seashore has supported that and endorsed those efforts in writing. The Advisory Commission with respect to the Pilgrim plant. To further public awareness and discussion, the Cape Cod National Seashore Advisory Commission's subcommittee pertaining to emergency and safety for the park and its visitors was organized. The Pilgrim Nuclear Plant Emergency Subcommittee, along with the Commission, sanctioned an economic study, which I would like to hand deliver tonight. And I was hoping to deliver one to the Pilgrim fellows. Could you please pass that, Rich? Also, if anyone would like to see this study, you go onto the Cape Cod National Seashore website. You type in, you'll see management on one of the menus, and in management, go to the Advisory Commission, and you will find that study. Okay, here's my citizen's hat. And I would like to briefly speak about 4 topics. One is called ultimate sacrifice, the second is wisdom, the third is prudence, and the fourth is democracy. Ultimate sacrifice. Cape Codders are being asked to shelter in, perhaps losing life and home. And in the end, the tax dollars that they've contributed would be used in the cleanup through the Price-Anderson Act. This may be a redefining of ultimate sacrifice. Wisdom. The National Regulatory Commission has stated that Pilgrim is one of the most vulnerable nuclear plants to terrorism. Shortly, and that actually happened yesterday, there was a simulated attack exercise at Pilgrim. And in 8 years from now, there'll be another. I ask you, where is the wisdom in 8 years from now? You probably will have had 3 or 4 cell phones. I don't know what you'll have in 8 years, but prudence. During the first days of Fukushima, the U.S. government advised its citizens to move 50 miles from the disaster site. Being a federal agency and knowing what lurks at Pilgrim, wouldn't it be prudent to advise the President and the first family of the possible dangers on vacationing on Martha's Vineyard due to the fact that it's within the 50-mile radius of Pilgrim? Democracy. With all the knowledge at hand and the outcries of the 15 Cape towns who voted to close Pilgrim, the Cape Cod National Seashore, the Cape Cod Commission, the Association for the Preservation of Cape Cod, the people's state and federal representatives, including the governor of the state of Massachusetts, where is the democracy? Why aren't their voices being heard? Right here in Plymouth, Massachusetts, in the land of the free, home of the brave, lies an outmoded, dangerously decaying, rather large Corvair. And the powers that be are having a hard time doing the right thing. Now my question, does the CEOs of Entergy dumping their stock, does that concern you at all?
Since I don't follow the financial news or financial markets, I really can't answer that particular question. But I do want to address, I think, some of the comments you made in the security area, and I do actually want to come back to something that Ms. Lampert raised about waterborne security. I think after the events of 9/11, this nation had a fairly substantive approach towards protecting its critical infrastructure, including nuclear power plants. I think any of you that have driven by Pilgrim and had seen Pilgrim 10 years ago before 9/11 would recognize a substantial amount of security enhancements that have taken place there. Nuclear power plants in the United States are the most robustly protected private facilities in this country and probably in the world. So, and that includes waterborne. Now, you mentioned the emergency exercise that was done yesterday, and I actually participated in that emergency exercise as NRC's lead representative up here, interacting with the state and the Township of Plymouth and other local agencies, and it was, from my perspective as a participant in observing what the state and the local police and other organizations that were involved did a very good job in terms of conducting the exercise and practicing how this area would respond with its integrated response to a hostile action at Pilgrim Nuclear Station. The other thing, though, that I wanted to make sure that everybody in here was aware is that every 3 years, the NRC conducts what's called a force-on-force exercise at every nuclear power plant in this country. And this is an exercise where we have a trained, well-trained adversary force that utilizes tactics that are provided to them by various members of U.S. armed forces in trying to circumvent security of nuclear power plants. And we evaluate every licensee on that on a triennial basis. Every year, the licensee conducts their own force-on-force exercises to make sure that their security force is prepared to respond to events, whether they be waterborne or whether they be land-based. And this country, the nuclear power plant industry, overall has a very, very good record in terms of having a very robust security force at their sites. I have a lot of confidence in the security forces that exist at these nuclear power plants to be able to defend against the design basis threat that the NRC has established.
But the 8 years, to redo that exercise, that simulated, that's ludicrous. So many things could change in 8 years.
Emergency exercises are done evaluated emergency exercises are done every 2 years, okay? Every 8 years, within every 8 years, they have to do at least one that's a hostile-based exercise, okay? So they're doing emergency exercises on an evaluated basis every 2 years. They're doing emergency exercises every year, and they're doing training in the interim year. So, I think it's a bit of a, unfair extrapolation to say that they only evaluate and test their ability to respond to an event every 8 years. Okay, that's a very robust radiological protection exercise program this nation has.
Hi. After you will be Jeff Berger, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm Rebecca Chin. I co-chair the Duxbury Nuclear Advisory Committee, and I'm the past chairman of the Duxbury Board of Health. So I've chosen radiation safety for the public and worker cornerstone to speak of tonight because I really don't believe it should be green. For the air, there's neither Entergy nor NRC have real-time combined air meteorological monitors placed off-site in both the near and the far field to record radiological data for alpha, beta, and gamma. Therefore, the NRC doesn't know what's blowing in the wind. National Academy's latest report said that there is no safe dose of radiation and that exposure to even very low levels of radiation is 3 times more dangerous than previously expected, and more so for women and children. We rely on statistics from the Massachusetts Cancer Registry. In 1982, it began recording data showing a continued increase in radiation-linked cancers in communities around Pilgrim. A review of the Massachusetts Cancer Registry data, complete through 2010, shows that in Plymouth from 2002 to 2009, a statistically insignificant increase level of leukemia at the 95% probability level. This means that there is at most a 5% chance that the difference between the observed and expected cases is due to chance. There is also a statistically significant increase in the level of prostate cancer and other radiation-linked diseases. For the previous 2 decades, the Mass Cancer Registry shows the footprints of radiation-linked disease, leukemia, thyroid cancer, multiple myeloma, and prostate cancer in the 7 towns most likely to be impacted by Pilgrim: Carver, Duxbury, Kingston, Marshfield, Pembroke, Plymouth, and Plimpton. The Cape is downwind from the Pilgrim much of the year, and it, along with the southeastern Massachusetts, has the highest cancer rates in the state. There has not yet been a study to determine if radiation emissions from Pilgrim are the missing variable to explain the high cancer rates here. A major case control study by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health in 1990 found a four-fold increase in the adult leukemia the closer one lived or worked at Pilgrim. To Pilgrim. Pilgrim did not like the results and cut a political deal, allowing it to appoint a second peer review panel to re-review the study and write a report. Well, even their hand-picked panel concluded that the original study team adhered to the generally accepted epidemiological principles, and the findings of the study could not be readily dismissed on the basis of methodological errors or proven biases. And the association found between leukemia and the proximity to Pilgrim nuclear facility was unexpectedly strong. Monitoring. The Mass Department of Public Health has very limited off-site monitoring program due to finances. Due to the lack of sufficient air monitoring coverage, the town of Duxbury has purchased an air monitor to be connected to the Mass Department of Public Health, and it was installed at the bay this morning. We noticed at the bottom of all your slides today and on your handout, it says the NRC is protecting people and the environment, and we ask you to please do that. Please require Entergy to fund an adequate number of monitors in the 10-mile EPZ zone and on the Cape.
So I would like Mr. Nogla here from my staff, who's a certified health physicist, to talk. I guess, I don't know if you can address all these things, but can you talk about the National Academy study, the cancer study that they're redoing? Do you want to talk about that? Okay, so between the two of you, tag team on this one? Okay.
Thank you. I too am interested in the environment, protection of the environment. It's been my career for the last 40 years, so I'm invested in it as a health physicist. I did want you to know about the monitoring of the air at Pilgrim Station and our involvement with that. So there's continuous air monitoring and continuous liquid monitoring of the discharges at the plant. Radiation monitors for those are in the control room, and for liquid and gaseous, they're automatic termination isolation that happens automatically if it gets above a set point. So there is actual termination of liquid and gaseous discharges above set points. So we get it at the source. So it's not something we don't know that's blowing in the wind. The other thing is that for the sampling, the stack where the gases leave and also the liquid discharge pathways are continuously sampled. Air samples are pulled off of the stack on a weekly basis for all the principal radionuclides. Are monitored for that. Liquid discharge is a composite monitor. Every 20 minutes takes another composite and ends up with about 5 gallons of liquid to be assessed on a weekly basis and composited on a monthly basis. So we have real-time isolation of the liquid and gaseous discharges, and we have monitors of the actual effluents that are done on a very detailed basis, and those are reported to us in an annual effluent report. So we do know what's blowing in the wind and what's going in the liquid. As far as the cancer, the NRC is involved with a new cancer study, and my esteemed colleague from headquarters can speak to that.
Thank you. Several years ago, as I was doing a series of public meetings, one of the many things that I heard from folks was that the 1990 cancer study that we had quoted that had been done by the National Cancer Institute was outdated. So I went to my management and I came up with a proposal that we update the cancer study to look at all the data since plants started operating across all the reactor sites that we have in the U.S. The National Academy of Sciences agreed to take on this project, and what they've done is they've did their phase 1 scoping study, which was to look at the problem and then to determine the path forward. So they went forward. They had a series of public meetings, data collection meetings across the country, looked at the effluent reports that have come out of the reactors, spent a lot of time studying the cancer data registries, the databases, and they came up with what they said was, kind of interesting, and we're going to start, actually we started phase 2 of the trial, but they proposed doing a pilot study of 7 or 8, I think it's 7 reactor sites across the country to look at the actual relationship between dose and cancer incidence. Now they've chosen units that have been in operation for a very long time. The big problem that they've run into in developing the study design, and this is where it's going to be very challenging for them, is that what they said is that the doses that they're going to be looking at from the reactors are well below natural background doses. So they're going to try and look at doses that are below natural background doses, and from that attempt to extrapolate the presence of increased incidence of disease or not from that data. And that's one that's causing them a lot of challenges, but they've decided to go forward, and the NRC has agreed to fund this phase 2, which just got kicked off a couple months ago, I believe. You can go to the National Academy's website, and it's actually the easiest way to get there is to go to the NRC webpage for the cancer study and link it, because it's called the National Research Council Office of Radiation, blah, blah, blah. We have a link that takes you directly to the National Academy's site for that update. But we've done that because we are interested in understanding if there is a link between low-dose radiation and cancer around our sites, if our regulations need to be looked at or adjusted, whatever, to look at that particular instance. So we started that. It's going to be a very expensive study, and it's going to take a number of years to complete. This is not something that can be done very quickly. It is projected to last the study probably, well, phase 2, and then there'll be determination if they need to do phase 3. And so phase 2 will take at least a couple years to get the National Academy folks to go through all that data and come up with their next recommendation for do we do phase 3, do we not do phase 3.
Jeff, after you will be Sarah Alter, Ted Bozen, and then Mr. Alfrey, I guess it is. Jane Alfrey. Thank you.
My name is Jeff Berger. I'm on the Nuclear Matters Committee in Plymouth. I'm Chairman Emeritus. The Nuclear Matters Committee is appointed by the town of Plymouth to act as a liaison between the plant and the town, and also to advise the Board of Selectmen on all matters related to nuclear power and other things related to the nuclear industry. I'm going to make several comments and ask a few questions. I will tell you first, based upon the comment that was made about cancer, that I was on a tour of the plant in the fall of 2002, and David Tarantino of Entergy at the time took us on the tour. One of the places that we went to was a position on top of the containment. I'm not sure whether I'm describing it correctly, but it was there was a low fence, and the area was fenced off. Those of you who have been in the plant, I know, Max may very well know this. It was kind of fenced off, and it was almost like a dome. And I asked, he said, and David said, this area is perfectly safe. We're at the top of the containment. So I said, why is there a fence there? And he said, it's no particular reason. So I said, so I could stand on top of that and there wouldn't be any danger to me at all. Is that correct? And he said, yes, that's correct. So I did. I stood on top of it. And, and we continued the conversation about the plan, about various things in the plan. Then probably 45 seconds later, he said, well, you probably ought to get off there now. If it was safe, then why did he tell me to get off? And if it wasn't safe, why did he allow me to go on it? All I will tell you is that was 2002, and in 2005, and at the end of 2005, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. I know that thyroid cancer is a marker for radiation. It's often caused by radiation. I don't know that about prostate cancer, and I don't know what the future holds for me. I'm still fighting prostate cancer. But I remember that as a very unpleasant experience. And, so I have legitimate personal questions about the effect of radiation on cancer. And I will tell you also something you probably already know, and that is that there are spikes of different types of cancer in this town. My son also has had 2 brain tumors. He fortunately is okay. But, I have very serious questions about cancer and radiation. There is a perception in this town among a lot of people that the plant is held together by bubble gum and spit. And the bubble gum is drying out and the spit is evaporating. And, I'm talking about a perception. I'm not going to say whether it's true or false. I have no idea whether it's true or false. But that's the perception on the part of a number of people in this town. It's something that Entergy needs to address. It's something that you folks need to address, because the impression is also based upon a lot of things that happened last year. For example, a lot of things wearing out. It seems to many people in this town that nothing is replaced in the plant until it wears out. Preventive maintenance isn't obvious. You've seen things yourselves in the control room where actuators of various types have worn out and had to be replaced. So the question is there effective preventive maintenance? And the impression on the part of a number of people in this town is that there isn't. Concerning the emergency protection zone, when Fukushima happened, you folks told Americans who were within 50 or 100 miles of Fukushima, I've forgotten which, to get out of the area. Yet you recently denied a petition to increase the size of the EPZ around Pilgrim from 10 to 15 miles. I don't get the disconnect between those two things, and I'd like you to address that. Also, the elevated spent fuel pool, you've said in public in the past that the elevated spent fuel pool is just as safe as dry cask storage. Any expert on security disagrees with that. Real experts on security, nuclear security. Also, the elevated spent fuel pool, if I had a small business jet and was flying along the, over the ocean and decided I wanted to go about 30 yards over the surface of the ocean and come at the spent fuel pool, I could probably do that. And by the time I was caught on radar or by satellites, because I know satellites watch this, I would already be at the plant. I'm not going to do that, but somebody could, and that should not even be possible. Also, the seismic analysis that you're planning to do, you said that, I believe you said that analysis was going to be done and overseen by Entergy. With all due respect to the folks at Entergy, many of whom I know, I think the perception of that is that you're suggesting that a good type of entity to do a security analysis of a henhouse would be a fox. And I think that's a bad perception, and I think you need to address that as well. I don't think that analysis, the seismic analysis, should be done by anybody connected to or overseen by Entergy. And finally, this is the last one. The design basis threat that you use, I have a lot of problems with it. One of the pieces of that is that you had, in the exercise you did yesterday, you postulated that 8 terrorists would try to make an incursion into the plant. I know security experts who think that that's absurd. There have been a lot of terrorist attacks worldwide. Many of them involve, well over a dozen people, sometimes 2 dozen, and sometimes more than that, and that just doesn't fly. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. We're going to try and address a couple of these things. Maybe I'll start with your last one first. Every year, the agency works with various intelligence agencies within the United States to understand what is an appropriate domestic threat in the United States. And if there is information or insights that we get from those intelligence communities that indicate that we ought to establish a different threshold for what a nuclear power plant should be required to be protected against, we would elevate that. And for example, that occurred after the events of 9/11, where the design basis threat was changed to reflect the new intelligence and information that came out of that attack here on domestic soil. So that's something that gets looked at and reviewed every year and assessed. With respect to the emergency planning zone and the 50 miles that was recommended at Fukushima, the situation that occurred over there, and Ms. Milligan was in our incident response center for weeks in the time right after the Fukushima event, and was involved in the discussions about what should we do. We had a request from the ambassador of Japan about what should he be providing as terms of recommendations to U.S. citizens that were in Japan, given the emerging events at Fukushima, which I think those of us who watched in horror at the things that we saw over there was a very substantive lack of information that was being communicated internationally from Japan. We knew that they had 3 reactors that were having core melt events. At the time that the 50-mile EPZ, or not EPZ, 50-mile evacuation area was recommended to the ambassador, he also had doubts or concerns about the Unit 4 spent fuel pool there. So you're looking at an event with potentially four reactor core melts going on simultaneously. And when you do an appropriate conservative analysis of what the potential deposition could be of radioactive material from a 4-reactor event, we felt that it was appropriately prudent and conservative to tell the ambassador at this point in time, given the uncertainty that existed, that we should have citizens leave that were within 50 miles of the Fukushima site. So that was a recommendation given to the ambassador, much like you would give a recommendation to an ambassador in a country where you have civil unrest, and we tell all our U.S. citizens to avoid going into this area. It was a similar sort of recommendation that was made to that ambassador. So as it correlates to emergency planning here in the United States, and as we've had already several questions and several discussions about that, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, after the events of 9/11, where concerns were raised about, gee, what if a plane were to crash into a nuclear power plant and cause an event that would have a release of the reactor? Does our emergency planning zone basis make sense in that kind of assessment? And actually several years of analysis involving not only the NRC but expert organizations, including organizations like Sandia National Labs and others, looked at that particular scenario, and we determined that the 10-mile emergency planning zone was still an appropriate planning basis, even for a catastrophic, rapidly occurring event like that. So we continue to affirm, and the recent information that was put out relative to the 2.206 petition that indicated that we're not going to look at that issue again, that we've studied that issue multiple times over the years, and we still firmly believe that the 10-mile emergency planning zone is an appropriate zone to do the detailed planning. Okay, and we continue to affirm, and I'm not sure if Mr. Giarusso from the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency is here. He was here earlier, that the capacity exists for planning to be expanded beyond that 10-mile EPZ if, for whatever reason, situations dictated that you needed to take actions outside of 10 miles in terms of evacuation or other emergency response issues. So I wanted to address those 2 items anyway.
Sarah? We are past the 8:30 end time of this meeting. We'll continue on with a few more questions.
Okay. First of all, I wanted to ask if the NRC is recording this session and taking it back. Is there going to be any record of our statements tonight? Or do we just have local radio and cable TV?
Do you have the local, the radio, the TV?
But what are you going to do with our information? You're just going to answer our questions here and bye-bye?
Well, I mean, in terms of if there are things that are actionable out of this,
yes,
obviously we'll take those actions. If there's information needs that the community has, we'll provide that information. But in terms of, is this a decision-making meeting for us, we're going to change our regulations or we're going to require Pilgrim to shut down or whatever. This is not that type of meeting.
No, I'm not asking you that. I'm simply asking, is someone taking notes so that you'll decide what might be actionable in case you didn't just... Okay.
I've got 5 pages so far, and I know that other staff here are taking notes as well.
Okay, good. And I also want to say I hear that there seem to be lots of... there seem to be 2 sides of things here, of people who have different facts from each other. And so my statement are going to be my facts from what I know, and I'd just like you to know that. I'm Sarah Altair, and I live in Kingston, which is 8 miles from the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station. The letter announcing this event says that tonight's public meeting to discuss the NRC's assessment of Entergy's Pilgrim plant will have a, quote, separate session to respond to questions on specific performance issues at the plant and the NRC's role in ensuring safe plant operations. I wish to speak to the latter part, the NRC's role in ensuring safe plant operations. The NRC's motto, prominently displayed on its website and stationery, is protecting people and the environment. Having read the NRC's letter to Entergy outlining the issues of concern in 2013 and listening to Entergy's responses tonight, I am wondering again about how the NRC can say that we are indeed safe and that the NRC is protecting us. I wish that somehow ordinary people like me, who live in this beautiful, historic, irreplaceable place, could do something to shake up this large bureaucratic agency, which I fear itself inhibits dealing with the real overriding issues pertaining to the safety of people and the environment here in southeastern Massachusetts. For tonight's meeting, we were asked to comment on or question an NRC document which uses a so-called action matrix with jargon like degraded cornerstone, cross-cutting themes, and a chart which puts indication of performance in little green and white boxes. I'm sure this works for the NRC and Entergy as it compartmentalizes the problem and creates a convenient checklist that everyone can use to make themselves feel as if something is being done. But I am not reassured. To my mind, this sort of compartmentalized thinking limits creative thinking and makes everyone involved lose sight of the overriding safety issues. The matrix doesn't include anything outside those little green and white boxes, already determined parameters, which have been created through a bureaucratic process so long they have lost their meaning. These performance indicators do not take into account important issues like the effect of climate change or sea level rise. The fact that there is no federal repository for nuclear waste as was promised when this plant was built, and we may be living with nuclear waste stored in Plymouth at least until 2092. And, of course, what we now know about the unanticipated disaster at Fukushima. What about the fact that Entergy has deemed itself a dry site, thus removing itself from NRC scrutiny, yet is planning to build its new dry cask storage very near sea level, and currently stores low-level nuclear waste in barrels behind a crumbling berm? What about the fact that Entergy determines the siting of its new dry cask storage facility based on its own determination of the risk of an earthquake or storm surge without independent study? Lost my place here a second. I won't be much longer. What about the fact that there is no protection from a terrorist attack from the sky? And, we disagree on that. I mean, people here just do not believe that, many people here do not believe that we are not vulnerable from the sky down there. There's no no-fly zone above the Pilgrim plant, and the NRC is not addressing that. Just a couple more paragraphs here. I think the NRC's attempts to protect the public of Boston and southeastern Massachusetts and the environment are woefully lacking. If our interest had truly been considered, I believe that the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station would never have been relicensed. Instead of looking at charts with little boxes, I ask you, representatives of the NRC and of your bosses, the Commission itself, to look outside the box and exert some leadership to counter the nuclear industry's pressures on the agency. I hope you will open your minds and focus on a bigger picture. the fact of the plant's age, the location of this reactor near sea level, the fact that it is incredibly vulnerable to terrorist attack, in my opinion, and the increased possibilities of an unanticipated and unplanned for nuclear accident there, as in Fukushima and Chernobyl. Perhaps the only really safe solution is to retire the reactor. Whatever you do, though, please remember that there are those of us who, having done a lot of research, sincerely believe that the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station is a serious and urgent threat, not only to our lives and property, but to that of our children and our children's children. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Sid. Thank you very much. My name is Theodore Boson. I'm a Plymothian. I've been here for 30 years, and this is I'm going to mark my calendar. It's the first time I've ever seen a licensee have to answer a question in public. So that's progress. All it took was 40 years. But I thank you because you made it happen. And this meeting is much better than what happened 2 years ago, that cocktail party of divide and conquer, which is what I called it. Thank you very much. I do mean that. I mean, a bit sarcastic, but I mean that. This is what we should have had from the beginning. We need to hear you address the licensee and the licensee answer questions. And we need participate in that. So we need a lot more of this. My 3 minutes is nowhere near enough, I will tell you now. I've spent 30 years. I'm one of the original members of the Nuclear Matters Committee. I've been a member of the Pilgrim Alliance. I founded the Freeze Pilgrim Committee to put a ballot question asking for your recommendations to be implemented before relicensing 2 years ago. 60% of the voters in this town voted for that. It's non-binding, of course, certainly wasn't binding on the NRC, who voted to relicense not only before the NRC recommendations, task force recommendations were in place, but before all the grievance procedures were adjudicated, which doesn't give us a whole lot of confidence, let me tell you. But frankly, I'm here on behalf of I'm wearing another hat tonight. Matt Patrick is running for state senate. And he has asked me to deliver this because he's traveling, couldn't be here tonight. And I have a sheet of what he wants to say, but I'll summarize it this way. He's very concerned about spent fuel, as many of us in the community are. It's particularly because of what you've heard here tonight, that you know is happening. The licensee is suing for compensation up at Vermont Yankee. They want to be paid for having to taken care of it. They're suing DOE to get out of having to take care of it. Your commission has more or less decided that we don't need, once dry cast storage facilities in place, that we don't need the same potentially EPZ and protections, which, as we see it, we're going to end up having to fund our local first responders. I hope they're listening here. They're here tonight. You're going to be having to learn how to deal with potential emergencies. And let me describe one. And Mr. Patrick is very concerned about this. That's why he is demanding that the NRC, and I know you can take this back to your commission, the NRC can use the decommissioning fund, can require them to use it to expedite putting that stuff in dry cast storage. I've quoted the CFR where basically says you can do that. Why is that important? Dave Lockbaum from Union of Concerned Scientists 2 years ago in a forum right here in Plymouth explained one of the risks, just one of the risks of that spent fuel pool. What you have is spent fuel in the pool in the reactor building. What happened at Fukushima during a power outage, the real problem was you had water in the panels that controlled the cooling systems of the reactor. So those shorted out. What are you going to have? As the lady here explained, well, we have 10 hours if, before that fuel begins to be exposed in an accident scenario. Where does that water go as it boils off? It's going in the same room, down low, it's going to collect and short out the panels which are not water resistant, and you're going to have a situation where you have cooling systems that aren't working to cool the reactor. The more water you put in the pool, the more water you're going to have down there shorting out the reactor. So you have two competing situations there. I haven't heard that being addressed by this commission. That was more or less an exposed situation to Fukushima that has not been addressed. This is the kind, and there are more. This is one of the reasons that we have to get the spent fuel out and into dry cask storage, which is much safer. I know the NRC thinks it's adequate in the spent fuel pool. We don't believe that. In this community, we don't believe that. I think it's almost intuitive that that is not adequate. By the way, I am, like Mr. Berger, one of those statistics. I lost my thyroid to cancer. That's one of those radiogenic diseases. Mr. Patrick thinks, why do I support him? Because of him, we have KI in the communities, within the EPZs. Because he got that legislation through in the state. So what is that? Potassium iodide. So when we have an accident, people, and especially our school children, can take that potassium iodide and not get what I've got. I used to eat the mussels in Warren Cove around the corner from the power plant before I knew any better. Those mussels later tested to have radionuclides, which are consistent with the inventory in that power plant. I am going to look into...
I have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay, I'm wrapping up. I'm going to check out the study that I've just learned about tonight and make sure that Mr. Berger and I are part of the statistics and follow up the methodology and see just what's going on with that, because I was not included in the first one. I just lost my thyroid a couple of years ago. Thank you very much. I appreciate this process. I really do. I think we need a lot more of it. Thank you.
If I can just take the opportunity to address one of the points that you raised, Ted, that perhaps provide you a little bit more information, where you were talking about there's nothing being done relative to being able to supply power to the facility if there were to be some cataclysmic event. In fact, one of the major lessons learned from the Fukushima accident that the agency has ordered all plants to address is how do they put in place mitigating systems and electrical systems to avoid a station blackout, right? The big issue at Fukushima, as you indicated, water got into electrical systems, basically eliminated all their power, and they basically had no instrumentation, no pumps operating, no way to operate electrical valves. And so a major element of the NRC's Fukushima lessons learned is to require plants to have the capacity to be able to provide power in the event that you have this, unbelievable event like occurred at Fukushima. So we actually had the opportunity today to tour the site and see some of the things that the licensee is doing. So for example, they have two independent parts of the site with huge C-vans where they have electrical generators stored, as well as portable diesel pumps for the ability to either provide water to various systems or to provide electrical power to important safety systems. And we had a chance to also see some of the things they're doing inside the plant to be able to connect that power. And I've had the opportunity to go to numerous nuclear power plants in the last year and see the modifications that are being taken place. So there is a lot of effort being expended to address that very issue, to make sure, even in a cataclysmic event, can they provide power and water to the critical systems. And that's the major lesson learned out of Fukushima that we're addressing and having industry address. So thank you, Ted.
My name is Janet Alfieri, and I just have a question. I've lived here for over 25 years in the Kingston and Plymouth area, and I've always looked at their evacuation plans, and there's been a couple, but they're all pretty much the same, and they just don't make sense to me as someone who knows the traffic situations around here. And I wonder if we could have input into maybe having a viable evacuation plan in this area, one that's actually workable, because we've never really tested the plan, and even in the winter we have traffic situations around here that are we're just stopped, and it just takes one accident on Route 3 and everybody goes through Plymouth and it's stopped. And I just would like to see some plans, especially for the summer, and that make common sense. And if, I don't know, you as the NRC must have to see their plan, and it must not make sense to you either. So I'm wondering if real residents could have some input into designing a plan that would actually maybe work.
So let me just talk a little bit, and Trish or others here may correct me if I speak erroneously. Emergency planning is a shared responsibility involving the state, local communities, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the NRC. And so evacuation plans that are developed in concert with all those organizations, in particular state and local communities working with FEMA. FEMA has the authority and responsibility under the federal government as to the adequacy and effectiveness of evacuation plans. And so we work very closely, and that's one of the things that they evaluate. So, for example, in the exercise that was done yesterday, one of the things that they would have evaluated was the capability for evacuating the area in that particular scenario. So, evacuation plans. Now, to be totally, we have never required people, let's go practice an evacuation. Let's spend an afternoon or a day and have, 80,000 people evacuate, right? I mean, that's, I don't think an appropriate thing that many citizens would want to spend their time doing, but they do want to have the confidence that there is an effective and viable emergency plan. And so there are emergency planning experts that work for the state, work for the local communities, work for FEMA that evaluate.
Excuse me, who are these emergency evacuation experts?
Well, I was hoping, we did have a representative from the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency here earlier, but he left. But, for example...
He works for the state?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was the name of the commission that he works for?
Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency.
Okay, Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency in FEMA? And
MEMA, which is the state, and then FEMA, Federal Emergency
both
Management
of those.
Agency. Correct.
And what about anybody local who works with them?
It would be the local, whoever's responsible for emergency response in the various communities would be engaged in that planning.
So Entergy?
Entergy to some degree, but like, for example, yesterday for the exercise, the individual who was responsible in the incident command post was the Plymouth town sheriff. Chief of police.
Oh, that's
right?
you.
I'm sorry.
The sheriff.
Yeah, chief of police. And he did from what I can see, he did a great job in terms of managing that event.
Okay, well, I just, I hope the chief reads that plan and realizes it's unworkable as well, because we all realize that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you have a remark?
No, I provide her with the names from Massachusetts and from FEMA. And get you in contact with right now.
Nancy's going to give her the right name.
Okay, Nancy's going to, one of my staff, my state liaison officer, Nancy McNamara, will give Janet the appropriate contact points. Thank you. Thanks, Nancy.
I'm going to take two more names this evening. One of them is Elaine Dickinson, and the last person will be Jim Lampert. Elaine?
Yes, my name is Elaine Dickinson, and I come from Cape Cod. Quite a few of us came up today, and in October of 2012, Kurt Schwartz, do you gentlemen know who he is? Mm-hmm. He's the director of the group you were just speaking about, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. And he came to Howard, my hometown, and he spoke. And I have a 21-page transcript that I will leave with you.
I'll spare you reading the whole thing, but you gentlemen may share. And in his comments to the people of Cape Cod gathered on that date, he informed us that we would be in harm's way, that the bridges would be closed, and we would send people in with protective tent clothing to help people relocate out. In the meantime, we would have to shelter in place, take potassium iodine, and wait for people to come in these suits and special Geiger counters to move us out. And we wouldn't come back for a long, long time. Visions of Fukushima and Chernobyl. We found that very unacceptable and a violation of public trust. The NRC, I understand, has a mandate for public safety. It's written all over your things. Public safety, people and environment. Everything that we love and hold dear on Cape Cod. Do you know, I've been to these meetings before, and some of the NRC gentlemen that come up from King of Prussia, they don't know what the geography is like on Cape Cod. We're not an island, but we're like an island, connected by a couple of bridges. And for the people in Plymouth, God love them, if something happens, they got to get out of town. People on the Cape, we're marooned there, and we're going to wait to get relocated. That's what Kurt Schwartz, the head of the MEMA, Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, said. Do you gentlemen know that? Are you aware that happened? That that's what he told us? Well, the people on the Cape are aware of it, and we weren't happy. So last year, we had ballots put on every single town in Cape Cod, all 15 of them. Whereas Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency Director Kurt Schwartz has acknowledged that the Cape residents and visitors are in harm's way in the event of a radiological accident at the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station in Plymouth. Whereas MEMA has determined that Cape residents and visitors will not be evacuated, but plans to relocate Cape citizens after exposure to dangerous radioactive materials released in an accident. Whereas citizens of the town, and every town on the Cape had this, the one I have is Barnstable, and I have copies to give you, find this state response to Pilgrim's threat to our health and our safety unacceptable and in violation of public trust. Therefore, we the people of the town of Barnstable and every other town, and 3 towns now on Martha's Vineyard, and more votes are happening as we speak, respectfully request the Governor Patrick, to call upon the NRC to uphold their mandate to shut Entergy in Plymouth because the public safety, particularly Cape and the islands, and visitors cannot be assured. And Governor Patrick has written to you, gentlemen. And if the lady that was going to address that doesn't have the time to do the question, I have letters that Governor Patrick wrote to Allison McFarland, and I can deliver those to you too. So my question in the group that came with us today, what does the NRC have to say to the people of Cape Cod and the islands and all the visitors who come there? What do you have to say?
Well, in terms of, I wasn't there, and I don't know what Kurt Schwartz told you. We have the transcript, so we'll look at that transcript.
We're in harm's way. We're going to we'll have to shelter in place and wait to be relocated. Basically, that's it in a nutshell.
You don't have shelters.
We don't have shelters, right.
Right, so.
Some of us have potassium iodine, but that only protects one thing.
Right, so what you're talking about is if there is a unprecedented cataclysmic event that causes the core melt of Pilgrim and the environmental conditions are such that the wind is blowing onto the Cape, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of issues there, right? So one of the things, many things that we're doing as a result of Fukushima are intended to preclude that sort of event from even being remotely possible. It already was remotely impossible, but as Fukushima proved, it's not totally impossible, right, for something like that to happen. Okay, that's the big lesson learned. It can happen.
We were told, excuse me for interrupting, but at this meeting last year, which was a different, somebody referred to it as a cocktail party without the cocktails, in the year before, there was an NRC gentleman that was asked the question, can Fukushima happen here? In 2 years in a row, he told us yes. I don't see him here. I hope he didn't lose his job. I hope he didn't lose his job because he was really honest. He said, yes, it could. All it requires is a lack of power. The
Right.
generators only last so long.
That's right. And that's exactly the point I was making to Mr. Bozen earlier, right? One of the big lessons learned out of Fukushima is you got to assure that there's a capability of getting water and having electrical power, okay, to avoid a Fukushima-like event from occurring. And that's all of these things, some of these things that I've been talking about tonight in terms of the protective measures that are being put in place, the additional equipment that's being acquired, the plant modifications that are being done, are all intended to provide even greater assurance that plants, and not just Pilgrim, but plants all over the country, are able to assure that there is power available and that there is ability to get water onto the core. And that's how you prevent a Fukushima event from happening.
Well, I think by tonight's meeting, with many people who have spoken with different angles in what they're addressing, the people do not feel confident. At all. At all. And the lady who has the governor's letter, if you could help me, you'll pass these out to these gentlemen. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes, well, I've seen Governor Patrick's letter, indeed.
These are the town of Barnstables, but every town has a similar one. And you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you very much. Joe? In a moment, they're going to put up what you've seen before that's really the report card. And I'm going to it because I think people need to understand why that report card is frankly so inadequate. But I'd like to say a couple of other things first because I think they illustrate why it's inadequate. You heard a lot tonight about, let's start off with yesterday's drill. What I think I heard Bill say was that, gee, everybody did sort of what we wanted them to do. The news reports that are coming out say it started bad and it went downhill from there. The NRC, unfortunately, looks at all of this with blinders. You're limited on what you look at. You're limited on what you do. I love that people are doing what they're supposed to do, but I'd be a lot happier if there were good results. There was a tabletop drill last spring. The scenario that was put out, people started out the scenario, and the plant was overwhelmed quickly. That's a bad result. Maybe people did what they were supposed to do. But process isn't what we really are looking at, particularly process that is so highly limited that it doesn't get us where we want to be. Up in front of you here, you have the report card on which everybody has been talking tonight, on which Pilgrim was graded. You've got 7 boxes across the top, initiating events, etc. You've heard most of those buzzwords tonight, but I suggest you take a look at them. Those are the cornerstones, am I right? And if every performance indicator under a cornerstone is green, the cornerstone is green also, am I right?
No.
What causes a cornerstone not to be green? Let's take mitigating systems. You have 5 boxes, they're all green. Why is mitigating systems green?
Okay, so what you're looking at is a small percentage of the overall reactor oversight process. What you're missing is the entire baseline inspection program where we spend thousands of hours at every site inspecting. So these are just the performance indicators, the 21 or so performance indicators that are a component of the reactor oversight process. You have to merge these results with the inspection results from our dedicated inspectors like Max and Mr. Noggle and Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Skraybeck at the plant. So that is actually the major contributor to our assessment.
Why aren't they on the report card?
Right there.
Gee, it's amazing. Everything, again, looks in. Let's go back to the original slide. The performance indicators that you look at there, you've got anywhere between 1 and 5 under various ones. Am I right? And those are the performance indicators that you used when you came up with this report. It finally dawned on me last night what's fundamentally wrong with this report card. When you read the boxes going across, your initial reaction at first blush is that these are really pretty good. We've looked at barrier integrity, we've looked at security, we've looked at safety. But you then look at the performance indicators, and what you are immediately struck with, especially if you go to some of the backup that's on your website, is how few of them there are, how many are omitted, and for the ones that are up there, how easy it is to pass. Look at your initiating events. Pilgrim had more events last year than anybody else in the country. The only ones you talk about here are those that resulted in scrams. There is no indication on this report card at all of any consideration of events that could have led to serious problems. Look at your mitigating systems. Not a single one has anything to do with the spent fuel pool. I asked that question meeting with some people this afternoon, and that was confirmed. As a matter of fact, when I heard from Mr. Dean, as he's gone through consistently, he talks about, oh, a reactor this, a reactor that. What is noticeably absent from any of this is what about this pool that has so much more radioactivity in it than is in the reactor, that it is the major danger, and it's going to be a major danger long after this reactor stops operating. Why aren't those systems in mitigating? Why aren't those listed in mitigating systems? Why aren't the things that you know have to be done in mitigating systems, like a wet well vent and like putting a filter into the dry vent well vent? You know those have to be done. You may have put them off for years, but how is everything green when you know it has to be done, but you just don't choose to recognize it at the time? Look at your occupational radio safety. Actually, public radiation safety yet. As I read the backup material, oh, we looked at the design specs, and we went to our manual, and it looks like everything's right. And as far as you can tell, neither an occupational radiation safety nor a public radiation safety occurrence has come up, period. For the last 2 years, you've got nothing but zeros. Have you asked how many people who work at Pilgrim have come down with radiological diseases in the last 2 years? What about those who are working here? Why aren't those taken into consideration? And the list goes on. Security. I heard Mr. Dean talk about commercial aircraft. What I found noticeably absent from that is what about small aircraft? Dan Wolf, Senator, was given the obligatory, let's take the pilots through and convince them how great this is, tour at Pilgrim. He was not impressed. He owns Cape Airways. He knows what a small plane can do. And that has a tin roof that's designed to be weak so it will blow up. And he had utterly no doubt that it would be a cinch to put a small plane loaded with explosives right there. We're not talking about somebody stealing something out of Logan Airport. We're talking about a small plane coming out of Marshfield or Plymouth.
I have to ask you to wrap up. 15 seconds.
But 15 seconds, if you're going to do it 15 seconds, let's just say this. It's time that the NRC took off its blinders, started looking at everything that really goes in to each of these so-called safety indicators. I'd be a lot happier if you'd admit that there are problems in these areas that you're working on than pretending that everything is hunky-dory and designing a test that doesn't protect me but ensures that the whole damned industry passes.
No, I guess the only comment or rejoinder I would have to that, and it gets back to, I think, you really have to look at the reactor oversight process in its totality. I would encourage you, Jim, to go look at the bases for all the various inspections that we do, and you'll have a much better sense of the breadth of activities that we evaluate through our inspection program. As I indicated, the performance indicators that you focused a lot of attention on are really a very small part of our evaluation process, and the bulk of our evaluation really is our very robust inspection program, 7,000 hours plus that we spent on Pilgrim last year. So,
obviously within the limits that are imposed on you by NRC.
Can you ascertain that Pilgrim today is adhering in totality to its license?
So the question from Mrs. Lampert is, can I affirm today that Pilgrim is in totality adhering to their license? And I think if I had 100 inspectors on the site, I could answer that question in affirmative. I have 2 inspectors on the site. Okay, we have to, by our very limitations in terms of resources, be smart about the things that we evaluate and look at. So there is a reliance on all the utilities to be able to identify, correct, their issues, which is why we focus a lot of attention on their problem identification and resolution practices, because we have to rely on them to have the safety consciousness. And so when you see plants that begun to degrade and we get into more substantive inspections, we do a very strong evaluation of the licensee safety culture. We actually bring in safety culture experts to see and evaluate whether there are human elements contributing to that performance decline, but they have to get to a certain performance level before they get there. So if Pilgrim's performance were to continue to decline and they moved into the next column of the action matrix, we would come in with safety culture. They would do an independent safety culture assessment, and then we'd come in and do our own to see if there's some underlying safety culture issues there. So to answer your question is, no, I can't say that. I can't say that with the staff that I have. But we have, somebody earlier, reasonable assurance, right, through our inspection and oversight processes that they are adhering to their license.
Okay, with that, I'd like to wrap up the meeting. The attendance here again was great this evening. We had some very great questions. Some of you had done a lot of work to research those and research your statements, so I greatly appreciated that effort. If you want to talk to some of the NRC staff afterward, you're welcome to. We do have to leave this room before too long. And if you do come up and talk to the NRC staff, I just ask to be careful of all these cables that are hanging out here until they disassemble everything. With that, Bill, anything else?
No.
All right. I'd like to wrap up the evening. Thank you.
Nice job.
You're welcome.